My wife has been working for 3 months without salary from her arrogant boss. When she finally mustered the courage to confront him about the situation, he smirked and said, "You are nothing to me, and I can choose to pay you whenever I want." Hello. Thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel to help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers. It would be great if you can also comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today, our special shout out goes to Justin Olsen from Denmark. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's dive into the details of today's story. The clock on the wall ticked like a heartbeat, slow and deliberate, mocking me as I stood outside Victor Grayson's office. It was late afternoon, the kind of gray, heavy light that seeps through the windows of Apex Innovations and makes everything feel like it's drowning. My hands trembled, not from fear, not yet, but from the exhaustion of carrying 3 months of silence like a boulder on my back. 3 months of sweat-soaked nights, hunched over spreadsheets, chasing deadlines that never seemed to end. 3 months of promises from Victor. The money's coming. Elena, just be patient. And not a single dime in my bank account. Today, that silence broke. Today, I'd had enough. I pushed the door open, the hinges whining like a warning I didn't heed. Victor sat there, king of his little empire, leaning back in his leather chair with that smug grin plastered across his face. His office smelled like expensive cologne and stale coffee, a mix that made my stomach churn. Papers were strewn across his desk, but not the kind I'd been killing myself over. Those were glossy brochures, plans for some new venture he'd been bragging about. He didn't even look up at first, just kept tapping his pen against a glass tumbler, the clink, clink, clink drilling into my skull. "Victor," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "We need to talk." He finally raised his eyes, cold and gray like the slate tiles under my feet. "Oh, Elena," he drawled, stretching my name into something slimy. "What's at this time? Another plea for overtime? You're starting to sound like a broken record." I swallowed the lump in my throat, the one that tasted like every late night I'd spent here instead of home with Javier. "It's not overtime. It's my salary. 3 months, Victor. I haven't been paid in 3 months. I've bills piling up, a car that's one cough away from the junkyard, and you keep telling me to wait. I can't wait anymore." He laughed, a short, sharp bark that hit me like a slap. Then he stood, slow and deliberate, towering over his desk like some predator sizing up prey. His suit was crisp, tailored, the kind of thing I couldn't afford even if I'd been paid on time. He crossed his arms, that smirk widening, and I swear I saw a flicker of something cruel in his eyes, something that liked watching me squirm. "Elena," he said, his voice dropping low, "you're nothing to me. Nothing. And I can choose to pay you whenever I damn well please. You think you're special because you push papers and kiss deadlines? You're replaceable. A cog. So run along, do your little job, and maybe I'll throw you a bone when I feel like it." The air sucked out of the room. My chest tightened, heat rushing to my face, not embarrassment, not anymore, but a raw, jagged fury. Nothing to him? After I dragged this company through project after project, keeping clients happy while he played golf and sipped whiskey? My fists clenched at my sides, nails digging into my palms, and for one wild second, I imagined lunging across that desk, wiping that smirk off his face with my bare hands. But I didn't. I turned on my heel, the click of my shoes echoing like gunshots as I stormed out, his laughter chasing me down the hall. The drive home was a blur. Headlights smearing into streaks, the radio static buzzing in my ears. I kept replaying his words, each one a splinter under my skin. Nothing to me. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the sky had darkened to a bruised purple, and my resolve had hardened into something sharp. I wasn't going to let him win. Not like this. Javier was in the kitchen when I walked in, sleeves rolled up, stirring a pot of arroz con pollo that filled the house with warmth. He's always been my anchor, dark eyes that see too much, hands that could build anything or tear it down. I dropped my bag by the door, the thud loud enough to make him glance over. "Rough day?" he asked, voice soft but edged with that quiet strength I've leaned on for years. I didn't answer right away. I just sank into a chair, kicking off my shoes, letting the ache in my bones settle. Then it spilled out, everything. Victor's smirk, his words, the way he'd turned 3 months of my life into a punchline. My voice cracked as I finished, and I hated it, hated sounding weak, but Javier didn't flinch. He set the spoon down, wiped his hands on a towel, and came to kneel in front of me, his hands resting on my knees. He said that. Javier's tone was low, dangerous, like the rumble before a storm. His jaw tightened, a muscle ticking under the stubble, and I saw something shift in his eyes, something dark and deliberate I couldn't quite place. "Yeah," I said, wiping at my face, furious at the tears that wouldn't stay down. "And he meant it, Javi." He looked at me like I was dirt under his shoe. Javier stood, slow and controlled, but there was a fire in him now, one I hadn't seen in a while. He turned back to the stove, but his hands gripped the counter, knuckles whitening. "He's going to regret that," he muttered, so quiet I almost missed it. "Trust me, Elena. He's going to pay." I frowned, tilting my head. "What do you mean? What can we do? He's untouchable, runs Apex like it's his kingdom." Javier didn't answer right away. He just stirred the pot, the scrape of the spoon against metal filling the silence. Then he looked at me, a ghost of a smile tugging at his lips, not the warm one I knew, but something sharper, something that sent a shiver down my spine. "Don't worry about it," he said. "Just eat. Rest. Tomorrow's a new day." I wanted to press him, to dig into that strange glint in his eyes, but I was too tired, too afraid. So I nodded, letting the smell of dinner pull me back from the edge. We ate in quiet, the clink of forks and the hum of the fridge the only sounds. But as I watched Javier across the table, his gaze distant, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting, something big, something he wasn't telling me. Later, after I'd crawled into bed, the weight of the day still pressing on my chest, I heard him in the study. The soft tap of keys, the rustle of paper. I drifted off to the muffled sound of his voice on a call, too low to catch the words. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that Javier wasn't just my husband anymore. He was the shadow pulling strings I didn't even see, drafting a letter that would turn Victor's world to ash by morning. And me? I was about to step into a storm I never saw coming. The morning sun sliced through the blinds of Apex Innovations like a blade, cutting sharp lines across the carpet as I stepped through the front doors. My heels clicked against the tile, each step a drumbeat in my chest, loud enough to drown out the hum of the AC and the distant murmur of early arrivals. I wasn't the same Elena who'd left this building yesterday, shoulders slumped under Victor's venom. No, something had shifted overnight, something Javier had set in motion, though I didn't know the half of it yet. All he'd said over breakfast was, "Go to work, Elena. You're in charge now." His eyes had burned with a certainty I couldn't argue with, even if my stomach twisted at the words. In charge? Me? I'd barely slept, replaying his cryptic promise, he's going to pay, and wondering what the hell he'd done. The elevator ride to the 5th floor felt like an eternity, the ding of each passing level rattling my nerves. My reflection stared back at me in the polished steel doors, dark circles under my eyes, hair pulled tight in a bun, a navy blazer that felt more like armor than fashion. I didn't look like a CEO. I looked like a woman who'd been running on fumes for months. But when those doors slid open, I straightened my spine, clutching the leather portfolio Javier had pressed into my hands that morning. Inside it was a single sheet of paper, stamped with a logo I didn't recognize and words I hadn't had time to process. Apex Innovations, under new ownership. Elena Martinez, Chief Executive Officer. My heart pounded as I crossed the open-plan office, past cubicles buzzing with whispers, and headed straight for Victor's, my office. The door was still ajar from yesterday, the scent of his cologne lingering like a ghost. I set the portfolio down on the desk, my fingers brushing the cool leather of his chair, my chair now. I sank into it, the cushion creaking under me, and for a moment, I just breathed. The view from here was different, higher, somehow, the city sprawling out beyond the glass like a prize waiting to be claimed. But the calm didn't last. A commotion erupted outside, shouts, footsteps stomping closer, and I knew who it was before the door flew open. Victor Grayson burst in like a hurricane, his face red and twisted, a crumpled letter clutched in his fist. His tie was askew, his hair wild, nothing like the polished tyrant who'd sneered at me yesterday. "What the hell is this?" he roared, slamming the paper onto the desk so hard the tumbler rattled. I didn't flinch, not outwardly, at least, though my pulse raced like a trapped bird. I glanced at the letter. Termination of employment, effective immediately. Javier's handwriting looped across the bottom, a signature I'd seen 1,000 times on grocery lists and love notes, now wielding a power I couldn't fathom. "Victor," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. I stood, meeting his glare head-on. "You're done here. Apex has new ownership, and I'm the CEO now. Your services are no longer required." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp, and for a split second, I saw his shock, eyes wide, mouth slack, like a man who'd just been punched in the gut. Then the fury came, fast and feral. "You," he spat, stepping closer, his breath hot with coffee and rage. "You think you can waltz in here and take my company? You're a nobody, Elena, a glorified secretary with delusions. Who put you up to this? Some cheap trick to humiliate me." I didn't back down, though every instinct screamed to shrink away. "It's not a trick," I said, my voice rising, cutting through his bluster. "It's done. My husband, Javier Martinez, owns Apex now. He bought it a month ago, and he's put me in charge. You're the one who's out." Victor froze, the name sinking in like a stone. "Martinez," he muttered, then laughed, a jagged, unhinged sound that sent a chill down my spine. "That bastard. I should have known he'd pull something like this. But you're nothing without him. You think you can run this place? You'll crash and burn, and I'll be there to watch." "Get out," I said, pointing to the door. My first command as CEO, and it felt like lightning in my veins, terrifying and electric. "Security's on their way. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." He lunged forward, slamming his hands on the desk, close enough that I could see the veins bulging in his neck. "This isn't over," he hissed. "You'll regret this, both of you. I'll tear this company down before I let you sit in my chair." Then he spun around, storming out, his curses echoing as he shoved past a startled Mia from accounting, who'd peeked in to see the chaos. The door slammed shut, and I sank back into the chair, my breath ragged. The office was silent for a heartbeat, then the whispers started. I could hear them through the glass, a hive of voices buzzing with questions. "Elena? CEO? Victor's gone?" I stood again, smoothing my blazer, and stepped out to face them. Heads turned, eyes wide, some with awe, some with doubt, a few with outright hostility. Mia gave me a small nod, her calculator still clutched like a shield, but others, like Greg from sales, Victor's lapdog, crossed their arms, sizing me up. "Good morning," I said, forcing my voice to carry across the floor. "I know this is sudden, but Apex is under new management, my management. Victor's gone, and we're moving forward. I'll have more to say soon, but for now, let's get to work." A murmur rippled through the room, half-hearted claps, a few muttered, "Yes, ma'am, s," and a glare from Greg that promised trouble. I turned back to the office, my legs trembling beneath me, and closed the door. Alone again, I pressed my hands to the desk, staring at the termination letter still crumpled where Victor had left it. My first command had landed, but it felt like stepping onto a tightrope over a pit of snakes. They were watching me, Victor, the staff, maybe even Javier from wherever he was, and I didn't know if I'd fall or fly. Outside, I heard security arrive, their radios crackling as they escorted Victor from the building. His voice carried one last time, a venomous shout, "You'll pay for this, Martinez." Then silence, thick and heavy, settled over Apex. I sat down, opened the portfolio, and stared at the title Chief Executive Officer next to my name. It was real. It was mine. But as the whispers grew louder beyond the glass, I wondered, could I hold it? Or would Victor's vow be the match that burned it all down? The air in Apex Innovations tasted different now, stale, yes, but laced with something heavier, something that clung to the back of my throat like dust off an old lie. It was Tuesday, 3 days since I'd taken Victor's chair, and the office buzzed with a nervous energy I couldn't shake. Phones rang unanswered, keyboards clacked half-heartedly, and every glance my way felt like a test I wasn't sure I'd pass. I'd spent those days locked in that glass-walled office, staring at a computer screen that might as well have been a labyrinth, trying to make sense of what I'd inherited. CEO. The title still felt like a borrowed coat, too big, too stiff, but Javier's voice echoed in my head. "You're in charge now, Elena. You've got this." I wanted to believe him. God, I did. But the truth was clawing its way up, and it wasn't pretty. Mia stood across from me that afternoon, her wiry frame hunched over a stack of ledgers she'd hauled in from the basement archives. She was the only one who dared approach me since Victor's exit, quiet, sharp-eyed Mia from accounting, with her calculator and her clipped way of talking that cut through the noise. "Something's off," she'd said yesterday, shoving a spreadsheet under my nose. "The numbers don't add up, Elena. Not even close." Now, as the clock ticked past 3, we were elbow-deep in financial reports, coffee cups littering the desk, the room growing dim as the sun sank behind the city skyline. "Check this," Mia said, her voice low, sliding a printout toward me. Her finger tapped a line buried in a sea of figures. Vendor payment, $50,000, Q3. No invoice. No record of delivery. Just gone. And it's not the only one. I squinted at the page, my stomach twisting. "What do you mean, gone? Where'd it go?" She flipped open another ledger, her movements quick, almost frantic. "Here, another one. $75,000 to a shell company called Dutton Enterprises. No contracts, no receipts. I've been cross-checking for hours, and there's dozens like this, Elena. Hundreds of thousands, maybe more, siphoned off over the last year." The numbers swam before my eyes, cold and accusing. My hands gripped the edge of the desk, the wood biting into my palms. "Victor," I whispered, the name tasting like bile. He wasn't just stiffing me on pay. He was robbing the whole damn company. Mia nodded, her lips a thin line. "Looks that way. But we need proof, something solid. If he hid this, he hid it deep." We kept digging, the hours blurring into a haze of ink and caffeine. The office emptied out, the hum of fluorescent lights the only sound as night crept in. I was about to call it quits when Mia yanked a thumb drive from her bag, a battered little thing she said she'd found in Victor's old filing cabinet, tucked behind a bottle of bourbon. She plugged it in, and a password prompt popped up. My pulse quickened. "Try Kingpin," I said, half joking, but Mia's fingers flew across the keys, and the screen unlocked. Files spilled open, encrypted spreadsheets, bank statements, emails. My breath caught as I scrolled through them, each click peeling back another layer of Victor's rot. Offshore accounts. Fake invoices. A memo to someone named Carl Dutton. Move the funds before the audit. They won't notice. And there, in a hidden folder labeled Insurance, was the smoking gun, a transfer log showing $200,000 funneled from Apex's payroll account into Victor's personal Cayman Islands stash. Dated 2 weeks ago. My missing salary, everyone's missing salaries, sitting in his pocket while he smirked and called me nothing. I leaned back, the chair groaning under me, a fire igniting in my chest. "That bastard," I said, loud enough to startle Mia. "He didn't just screw me over, he screwed us all. And he thought he'd get away with it." Mia's eyes gleamed, fierce and steady. "He won't. Not if we take this to the cops. Or whoever owns this place now. Javier." My mind snapped to him, to that quiet promise he'd made. I grabbed my phone, the screen glowing 9:47 p.m., and bolted for the elevator. I needed to get home, to tell him what we'd found, to figure out our next move. The city lights blurred past as I drove, the thumb drive burning a hole in my pocket, every shadow on the road feeling like Victor lurking, waiting to strike back. When I stumbled through our front door, Javier was there, shirt untucked, a glass of red wine in hand, the kitchen soft with the smell of garlic and thyme. He took one look at me, wild-eyed, breathless, and set the glass down. "What happened?" he asked, crossing the room in 3 strides. I held up the drive, my voice shaking with triumph and fury. "Victor's been stealing, Javi. Hundreds of thousands, maybe millions. It's all here. Proof he's a thief, a liar, everything." His face darkened, but his hand on my arm was steady, warm. "Good," he said, low and firm. "You've got him now. You're doing it, Elena, taking control. I knew you could." I wanted to bask in that pride, but doubt clawed at me. "I don't know, Javi. This is bigger than me. What if I can't handle it? The staff barely trust me, and this could blow up everything." He pulled me close, his breath against my hair. "You're not alone in this. You've got me, and you've got what it takes. Show them who you are, Elena. Show him." I nodded, clinging to his words, but the weight of that drive pressed against me. Back at Apex, I was unraveling Victor's empire, but across town, in a dimly lit bar, he was plotting mine. I didn't know it then, but Victor had already found Carl Dutton, a wiry man with a scar across his cheek and a voice like gravel. They sat hunched over a table, a laptop glowing between them, fake documents taking shape, Lies about Javier, about me, about Apex. Martinez thinks he's won, Victor snarled, his fingers trembling as he typed. But I'll bury him. And her. The night stretched on, and while I lay awake beside Javier, the thumb drive on the nightstand like a loaded gun, Victor's desperation hardened into a plan. I'd found the rot, but he was ready to spread it, faster, darker, and straight for my throat. The city woke up screaming my name, or at least, that's how it felt when the headlines hit. It was Friday morning, 5 days since I'd claimed Victor's chair, and the air outside Apex Innovations crackled with a tension I couldn't see but could damn well feel. I barely slept, the thumb drive's secret still buzzing in my skull, when Javier's phone started shrieking at dawn. He bolted upright beside me, his face a mask of stone as he scrolled through alerts, news notifications, texts, a flood of noise that spilled into our quiet bedroom like a storm breaking a dam. "Elena," he'd said, voice tight, "turn on the TV." I fumbled for the remote, my hands clumsy with a dread I couldn't name, and there it was, Channel 7's morning anchor, her polished smile gone sour, reading a headline that punched the breath out of me. Apex Innovations owner accused of wage theft. Exploitation, whistleblower leaks shocking docs. The screen flashed grainy scans, letters, emails, payroll records, all fake, all twisted to paint Javier as a monster who'd bought Apex to bleed it dry, forcing employees like me into unpaid labor. My name was there too, smeared across the story, Elena Martinez, wife and puppet CEO, complicit in husband's scheme. The room spun, the remote slipping from my grip as Javier cursed under his breath, already dialing his lawyer. Victor. It had to be him. That snake hadn't slithered away quietly, he'd struck back, hard and fast, with lies so bold they almost felt true. By the time I got to Apex, the news was everywhere, TVs in the lobby blaring it, phones buzzing in employees' hands, the city swallowing his poison whole. I walked through the front doors, my blazer feeling like a target on my back, and the whispers hit me like a wave. I started my way, some curious, some accusing, and the air thickened with doubt. I'd barely made it to my office when Greg from sales, Victor's loudest lapdog, blocked my path, arms crossed, his sneer sharp enough to cut glass. "So," he drawled, loud enough for the whole floor to hear, "you and your husband think you can play us all? Starve us while you cash out?" Victor was right. You're nothing but a fraud. I froze, heat flooding my face. "That's a lie," I snapped, my voice shaking but firm. "You've seen the real numbers. Victor's the one who stole from us. This is his payback." Greg laughed, cold and bitter. "Sure, Elena. Keep telling yourself that. We're not buying it." He turned away, leaving his words to fester, and I saw heads nod, too many heads. The rot Victor left behind wasn't just in the books, it was in them. Inside my office, I slammed the door, the glass rattling, and sank into the chair. My phone lit up, Javier, texting updates, PR teams on it. Legals filing defamation. Stay strong. But strong felt a million miles away. The walls seemed to close in, the city's hum beyond the window turning into a roar of judgment. I opened my laptop, emails piling up, reporters, clients, even a board member demanding answers. Apex was teetering, and I was the one supposed to hold it up. Me, the woman who'd barely slept, who still heard Victor's "you're nothing" in every quiet moment. That night, home wasn't a refuge. Javier paced the living room, phone pressed to his ear, his voice rising as he barked at his crisis team. "No, we counter it now, hard evidence, not platitudes." He slammed the phone down, running a hand through his hair, and I saw the cracks, frustration etching lines into his face, a man who'd built an empire now fighting to keep it. I stood in the doorway, clutching a glass of water I hadn't drunk, and our eyes met. "They're eating it up, Elena," he said, quieter now, defeated. "Victor's winning." "He's not," I said, but the words felt hollow. "We've got the truth, his embezzlement, the drive. We just need to. Truth doesn't matter if they don't believe it." He snapped, then winced, softening. "I'm sorry. I didn't think he'd go this far." I set the glass down, my hands trembling. "Neither did I. But he's dragging us both down, Javi, and it's tearing us apart." The air between us thickened, a strain we hadn't named creeping in. He reached for me, but I stepped back, needing space, needing to breathe. The next morning, Apex was a battlefield. I walked in to find a cluster of staff by the break room, their voices hushed but sharp, slicing through the hum of the coffee machine. I slowed, catching fragments. If she's part of this, why should we listen to her? And my heart sank. It was Tess from marketing, her tone bitter, joined by Greg's low growl. She's no CEO. Just Javier's mouthpiece. Victor warned us. I pressed myself against the wall, out of sight, their words a knife twisting in my gut. They didn't trust me, not my leadership, not my story. I was losing them, losing everything. I could have run then. Back to Javier, back to the safety of letting him fix it. But something snapped inside me, a spark flaring in the dark. No, Victor didn't get to win. Not with lies, not with this. I straightened, my pulse pounding like war drums, and marched to my office. Mia was there, bleary-eyed but waiting, a stack of printouts in hand. The real financials, Victor's theft laid bare. "We've got enough," she said, fierce and steady. "You just need to show them." I nodded, my throat tight. "I will. No more hiding behind Javier's moves. This is on me." I grabbed the files, the weight of them grounding me, and turned to face the storm. Victor's counterattack had shaken Apex to its core, but I wasn't his puppet, or Javier's. I was the one in this chair, and I'd damn well prove it. The city might be screaming, the staff might be doubting, but I was done bending. It was time to fight. The Apex conference room smelled like stale donuts and nervous sweat, a cavern of glass and steel that swallowed sound and spit it back as echoes. It was Monday morning, the city still buzzing with Victor's lies, and I stood at the head of a long table, staring out at a sea of faces, 43 employees, some slouched, some rigid, all waiting for me to prove I wasn't the fraud the headlines screamed I was. My hands gripped a stack of files, the edges digging into my palms, and my blazer felt tighter than ever, like it was holding me together when everything else threatened to unravel. I'd called this meeting on a razor's edge of instinct, fueled by Mia's evidence and a fire that had sparked when I'd overheard Greg and Tess shredding my name. No more hiding. No more letting Victor's shadow dictate my story. Today, I'd take the helm or sink trying. The room hummed with restless energy, chairs creaking, pins tapping, a cough cutting through the silence as I stepped to the projector. I'd spent the weekend with Mia, poring over every scrap of Victor's theft, turning numbers into a weapon. Now, it was time to wield it. I tapped the remote, and the screen flared to life, a spreadsheet glowing stark white, rows of red ink glaring like bloodstains. "Good morning," I said, my voice slicing through the din, louder than I'd expected. Head snapped up, eyes locking on me, some curious, some hostile. Greg leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his smirk daring me to fail. "I know what you've heard," I began, pacing slow and deliberate, letting each word land. "The news says Javier exploited you, that I'm his puppet, that Apex is a sinking ship. I'm here to tell you the truth, and it's uglier than anything Victor's fed the press." I clicked to the next slide, Victor's transfer log, $200,000 siphoned from our payroll to his offshore account. A gasp rippled through the room, soft but sharp, and I pressed on. "This is why you haven't been paid. Not because of Javier, not because of me, but because Victor Grayson stole from us." Hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, funneled into his own pockets while he smirked and called us nothing. The air shifted, thick with shock and murmurs. I flipped to an email, Victor to Carl Dutton, plotting to dodge an audit, and then another, a bank statement with his name in bold. "He didn't just stiff me," I said, my voice rising, raw with the fury I'd carried for months. "He stiffed every one of you. Your overtime, your raises, your livelihoods, gone, because he thought he was untouchable. But he's not. Not anymore." I paused, letting it sink in, watching faces change, Tessa's eyes widening, Mia nodding fiercely, even Greg's smirk faltering. "Javier bought Apex to save it." I continued, softer now. "And he put me in charge because he believes in me. I didn't ask for this, but I'm here, and I'm not letting Victor win. Starting today, we're seizing his assets, every dime he stole. You'll get your back pay by the end of the week. That's my promise." The room erupted, claps, cheers, a few hesitant yes, but not everyone joined in. Greg stood, slow and deliberate, his voice cutting through the noise. "Pretty words, Elena. But how do we know this isn't more spin? You've got his stink all over you." A few heads nodded, wariness lingering like smoke. I met his stare, my pulse pounding, but my resolve steel. You don't have to trust me yet, Greg. Trust the evidence. It's all here, public records, bank logs, emails. Check it yourself. I'm not hiding. He sat, grudgingly silent, and I felt the tide turn. Not fully, not cleanly, but enough. The applause swelled again, louder, and I stood taller, the weight of their faith settling on my shoulders. This was it, my rise, my moment. I wasn't just Javier's wife anymore. I was their CEO. Back in my office, the high lingered, but reality crashed in fast. Javier called, his voice tight with urgency. Elena, we've got a problem. Victor tried to blackmail me. Sent a doctored recording to my lawyer, claiming I threatened him into selling Apex. It's fake as hell, but he's desperate. I gripped the phone, my stomach lurching. What do we do? I've got something better, he said, an edge of triumph creeping in. Remember that night you came home, when I said he'd pay? I recorded him, every word of his threats when he stormed out. Legal's got it now, and it's gold. He's done. Relief flooded me, but it was laced with awe. You planned this, I said, almost a whisper. You knew he'd fight back. Not this dirty, Javier admitted, but I knew he'd slip. We're a team, Elena. You hit him from the front, I've got the flank. Finish it. I hung up, my hands trembling, not with fear, but with power. Javier's trust, the staff's tentative belief, the evidence piling up, it was all aligning. I called Mia in, and we drafted a press release with the real financials, attaching Victor's own words from Javier's recording. I'll tear this company down before I let you sit in my chair. By noon, it was out. News outlets scrambling to flip the narrative, Victor's blackmail imploding in real time. That evening, I met Javier at his downtown office, a sleek space of wood and glass, worlds away from Apex's chaos. He stood by the window, city lights glinting off his silhouette, and turned as I walked in. You were incredible today, he said, crossing to me, his hands finding mine. I heard the meeting buzz, Elena Martinez, the CEO who fought back. I smiled, exhaustion and pride warring in my chest. We fought back. Your recording sealed it. He shook his head, pulling me close. No, you did. I just gave you the tools. You're the one steering this ship now. His faith wrapped around me, solid and warm, and for the first time, I believed it too. Outside, sirens wailed faintly. Victor's arrest drawing near, though we didn't know it yet. The police were closing in, armed with our evidence, his lies crumbling under their weight. Apex wasn't safe, not entirely. Not with Greg's glare still burning in my mind, not with Victor's desperation unspent. But as I stood there with Javier, our hands locked, I felt the helm in my grasp. I wasn't just holding on anymore. I was steering. The city smelled like rain that Tuesday night, a sharp, electric tang that hung over the streets as I drove home from Apex, my hands tied on the wheel. The news had been quiet since our press release hit, Victor's lies unraveling under the weight of truth, but a knot in my gut told me he wasn't done. Not yet. I'd seen the venom in his eyes when he'd stormed out, heard the echo of his vow, I'll tear this company down, and it lingered like a shadow I couldn't shake. Javier's recording was in police hands now, alongside the financials Mia and I had unearthed, but the silence felt too heavy, too loaded. Something was coming, and it was barreling straight for us. Across town, in a dingy warehouse Victor called a hideout, he hunched over a rickety table, the air thick with cigarette smoke and desperation. I didn't see it then, couldn't, but the scene played out like a fever dream later, pieced together from whispers and court records. Carl Dutton sat across from him, his scarred face lit by the glow of a laptop, fingers twitching as he uploaded a file. It was their last gambit, a doctored audio clip, Javier's voice twisted to sound like he'd bribed Victor into selling Apex, a final stab at blackmail to force us out. Victor's laugh was jagged, his hands shaking as he lit another smoke. This'll ruin Martinez, he snarled, eyes wild. Him and that wife of his, they'll beg me to take it back. Carl nodded, but his jaw was tight, his gaze flickering to the door. He'd seen the news, felt the noose tightening. Our evidence was ironclad, and Victor's desperation was a sinking ship. The upload finished, the file sent to Javier's lawyer with a ransom note. Drop the charges, or this goes public. Victor leaned back, smug for a moment, but Carl was already calculating, his loyalty fraying like cheap thread. Back at home, Javier met me at the door, his phone buzzing with a new alert. "They've got something," he said, voice low and urgent, pulling me to his study. The lawyer's email glowed on the screen, Victor's blackmail, the fake recording attached. I listened, my stomach churning as Javier's voice, warped and wrong, spilled from the speakers, "Sell me Apex, or I'll bury you." It was clumsy, obvious to anyone who knew him, but in the wrong hands, it could have reignited the scandal. Javier's fist clenched, his breath sharp. "He's grasping, Elena. This is all he's got left." I nodded, my own anger flaring. "It's not enough. We got to reel him, his threats, his theft. He's finished." Javier called the police, forwarding the file, and within hours, they were moving tires screeching toward that warehouse, lights flashing in the dark. The next morning, I stood in Apex's lobby, the TV mounted on the wall flickering with breaking news. Victor Grayson arrested in fraud scheme scrolled across the ticker, and I watched, heart pounding, as footage showed him being hauled from the warehouse, hands cuffed behind his back. His suit was rumpled, his face a mask of fury and disbelief, shouting at the cameras, "This is a setup. Martinez framed me." But the reporter's voice cut through, calm and damning. Police recovered authentic recordings and financial records proving Grayson's embezzlement, contradicting his claims. Carl wasn't with him. Word was he'd turned state's evidence, spilling every detail to save his own skin, leaving Victor to drown alone. The staff gathered around me, a hush falling as we watched his fall. Some cheered, a ragged "good riddance," breaking the silence, but others stayed quiet, their eyes on me, testing, waiting. I turned to head upstairs, victory humming in my veins, when Greg stepped into my path, his bulk filling the hallway. He'd been a thorn since day one, Victor's loudest echo, and now he stood there, arms crossed, his voice a low growl. "You think this changes anything, Elena? You're still a fluke. Victor's gone, but I'm not bowing to you." The air crackled, heads turning, a dozen pairs of eyes boring into us. I could have walked away, let security handle him, but something snapped. Months of his sneers, Victor's taunts, the weight of proving myself. I stepped closer, close enough to smell the coffee on his breath, my voice steady as steel. "You don't have to bow, Greg. You just have to work, or leave. I'm the CEO, not your babysitter. Pick a side, because I'm done with games." He blinked, caught off guard, and I saw the flicker doubt, maybe fear. The room held its breath, and then he stepped back, muttering under his breath as he slunk away. A murmur rippled through the crowd, approval, respect, and I felt it settle, a crown I'd forged myself. I turned to the elevator, my heels clicking with purpose, and rode up to my office alone. Later, I drove to the courthouse, needing to see it end. Javier met me there, his hand finding mine as we slipped into the back row, the room stark with fluorescent light and the tang of old wood. Victor stood at the defendant's table, shackled and small, his lawyer scrambling as the judge read the charges: fraud, embezzlement, extortion. The evidence piled up, our recordings, the thumb drive, Carl's testimony, and Victor's shouts grew weaker, drowned by the gavel's crack. When they let him out, cuffs glinting, he caught my eye across the room. His glare was venom, but it was impotent, a snake with no fangs. I didn't flinch. I just watched, Javier's grip steady beside me, as they dragged him away, defeated, isolated, a king toppled by the nothing he'd mocked. Back at Apex that afternoon, I stood at my office window, the city sprawling below, a kingdom I'd claimed inch by bloody inch. The staff buzzed downstairs, work resuming, trust taking root. Greg hadn't quit, not yet, but he'd fallen silent, and that was victory enough. Victor's fall was complete, his empire ash, but mine was rising. I'd faced him, faced them all, and I'd won, not just for Javier, not just for Apex, but for me. The morning sun spilled across my desk at Apex Innovations like liquid gold, catching the edges of papers and pens and turning the glass walls into a prism of light. It was mid-March, weeks since Victor's handcuffed exit, and the air here felt lighter now, cleaner, like the city had exhaled a breath it had been holding too long. I stood by the window, coffee steaming in my hand, watching the skyline glitter with a promise I'd fought to claim. Downstairs, the office hummed, not with whispers or doubt anymore, but with purpose. Phones rang, keyboards clacked, Laughter even spilled from the break room now and then. Apex was alive again, and I was the one steering it, my hands steady on the helm at last. It hadn't been easy, those first days after Victor's fall. The company was a battered ship, leaking cash, morale shot, clients jittery from the scandal. I'd walked into meetings with my stomach in knots, facing board members who'd eyed me like a gamble they weren't sure would pay off. But I'd had Mia's numbers, Javier's faith, and a fire in my gut that wouldn't quit. We'd seized Victor's assets, every offshore dime, and funneled it back into paychecks, bonuses, even a new coffee machine that didn't spit sludge. I'd sat with every team, listened to their gripes, Greg's crew grumbling about quotas, Tess begging for better software, and I'd acted. No more top-down decrees. No more kings and leather chairs. I'd promised them a voice, and I'd kept it. The changes rolled out fast, healthier schedules, transparent budgets, a mentorship program Mia pitched that turned quiet interns into spark plugs. The staff noticed. Tess stopped avoiding my gaze, her thanks, Elena, over a new design tool carrying a weight I hadn't expected. Greg stayed prickly, but he'd clocked in every day since our showdown, his silence a grudging truce. Word spread, clients came back, new ones called, and Apex's pulse grew stronger. I wasn't just holding it together anymore. I was building something, brick by stubborn brick. That afternoon, I sat at my desk, the room quiet except for the soft scratch of my pen. A contract stared up at me. Techsphere, a mid-sized firm wanting Apex to overhaul their systems, a six-figure deal that had been dangling just out of reach for months. Victor had botched the pitch, too busy skimming to care, but I'd rebuilt it from scratch. Late nights with Mia, mock-ups sketched on napkins, a vision that wasn't his but mine. Now, their CEO's email glowed on my screen. We're in. Signed by 5 p.m. My heart thudded, a mix of nerves and thrill, as I inked my name. Elena Martinez, Chief Executive Officer, the flourish bold and final. I leaned back, the pen clattering to the desk, and let out a breath I didn't know I'd held. My first major deal, signed in a chair I'd made my own. Apex wasn't just surviving, it was thriving, and I'd done that. Home that night felt like a sanctuary, the kitchen warm with the scent of Javier's paella, the windows open to a breeze that carried spring on its back. He stood at the stove, apron tied loose, humming some tune I couldn't place, and I watched him from the doorway. My rock, my partner, the man who'd seen this in me before I had. I set my bag down, the thud soft, and he turned, a grin breaking across his face. Big day, he asked, wiping his hands on a towel. I crossed to him, pulling the contract from my bag and sliding it onto the counter. Signed Techsphere. It's official, Apex is back. His eyes lit up, pride flashing bright as he pulled me into a hug, his arms solid and sure. I knew it, he murmured against my hair. You're unstoppable, Elena. I told you that first night. I laughed, the sound freer than it had been in months. You did, but I didn't believe it, not then. Victor had me so twisted up, I thought I'd never climb out. He stepped back, hands on my shoulders, his gaze steady. You didn't just climb out. You tore his world down and built yours on the ashes. I'm damn proud of you. The words sank deep, warming me from the inside. We sat at the table, plates steaming between us, and talked, not about Apex or Victor, but us. How we'd weathered the storm, his quiet moves, my loud battles, and come out stronger. I couldn't have done it without you, I said, Fort paused midair. That recording, the buyout, you gave me the chance. Javier shook his head, his smile soft. I gave you a push. You took the leap. That's all you, Carino. He reached for my hand, his thumb brushing my knuckles, and I felt it. The partnership we'd forged, not just husband and wife, but equals in a fight we'd won together. Later, after dishes clinked in the sink and the house settled into a gentle hush, I slipped back to Apex. The office was dark, save for the glow of my desk lamp, and I stood at the window again, the city a tapestry of lights below. I traced the skyline with my eyes, towers I'd once felt crushed by, now markers of a path I'd carved. Victor's voice still haunted me sometimes. You're nothing, but it was fainter now, drowned by the hum of a company I'd revived, a team that trusted me, a deal with my name on it. I wasn't nothing. I was everything I'd fought to be. The phone buzzed, a text from Mia. Text fears thrilled. More calls tomorrow. You're killing it. I smiled, setting it down, and let my hands rest on the glass, cool against my palms. This was my era. New, harder and mine. No more shadows, no more doubts. I'd started as a pawn in Victor's game, a wife in Javier's plan, but I'd ended as a leader, a force, a woman who'd turned ruin into rain. The city stretched out before me, vast and alive, and I knew I wasn't just part of it anymore. I was shaping it. And that's where my story ends, for now. From Victor's fall to Apex's rise, it's been one hell of a ride, and I'm so glad you've been here with me every step of the way. If this tale of revenge, resilience, and reclaiming what's mine hit you right in the feels, or got your pulse racing, don't keep it to yourself. Drop a comment below and tell me, what moment made you cheer the loudest? What would you have done in my shoes? I'll be reading every single one, so let's keep this fire going. Oh, and if you haven't already, smash that like button. It's the easiest way to tell me you want more stories like this. Subscribe and ring the bell too, because trust me, there's more where this came from. New battles, new victories, all waiting to unfold. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, keep fighting for your own era.